Since this is the first episode of the SSD Live giveaway show, it also marks the first segment in which I, Joseph Craven, get to talk about some of my favorite old school video games. So why not start things off with my favorite Nintendo 64 game of all time, Space Station Silicon Valley. 1998's cartoony sci-fi delight, Space Station Silicon Valley told the ridiculous tale of two mercenaries hired to discover why the titular space station had re-emerged after 1,000 years of being lost in space. Man, the 90s were awesome for storylines. So upon crash landing on the station, the robot part of the mercenary duo is launched from the ship, with its body splitting into 4 parts and its main processing microchips separating and wandering around on its own. Without the body around it, Evo's microchip is steadily losing power, so it must take control of whatever deactivated robot animal body it can find in order to avoid dying. Oh, right. So the space station is inhabited by robot animals. That's important to know because otherwise you would be confused as to why you were controlling a rocket-launching dog on wheels. And a lot of the gameplay revolved around using these different animals to solve puzzles. Before using any animal, though, you had to figure out how to defeat it and deactivate it so that you could take control of its limp and lifeless body. The game really shines in the attention to little details, especially its encouragement of creative problem solving. Each animal has 2 abilities controlled by the classic A and B buttons, and those abilities are useful in some situations, but completely useless in others. See, a sheep, for example, can't attack, which puts it at a massive disadvantage when facing something like a lion, which wants nothing more than to eat the sheep. But the sheep can float in midair, because it's soft and fluffy like a cloud. Just, don't overthink it. So if there are any platforms floating in the air that you have to navigate to, the lion isn't going to be able to get there. The sheep can. And if there's a series of switches that have to be activated in a quick and orderly manner, then a slow floating sheep isn't exactly helpful. You want Rocket Dog and his zippy quick wheels. Of course, the game is pretty open in how you solve the puzzles, so there's really no reason at all that you couldn't use the dead body of that slow sheep to hold down a switch while you casually hit the other switches with the dog. Be creative. That's kind of the point of Space Station Silicon Valley. It's not quite a sandbox game, but it was about as close as you could get from a 3D platformer in the late 90s. And I think that's why I loved it so much as a kid, because while it was fun to beat video games and to defeat levels and keep advancing, this game brought a lot more joy out of the fact that you could reload a completed level just to explore it deeper and see what the different animals could do. If Super Mario 64 brought platforming to new heights by introducing a lot of open world elements, then Space Station Silicon Valley took it to a different level by introducing new ways to interact with the world that you were placed in. Now, this is big time for a game that not a whole lot of people actually remember, but if you go back and look at the history of the game, it's not all that surprising. Development began in 1995 as a deal between developer DMA Design and publisher BMG Interactive. These names might not mean much of anything to you these days, but you might recognize some of their handiwork. BMG had the rights to publish a few games in the 90s, such as Gex, a game they made with 3DO and Crystal Dynamics about a lizard in sunglasses, because once again, the 90s were pretty great as far as storylines go. DMA Design was a little more notable in the gaming industry, though, as the small Dundee, Scotland-based developer, here's their original location, reached notoriety in 1991 with the release of their puzzle platformer hit game, Lemmings. In the mid-90s, DMA started work on a game they were entitling Race and Chase, with a bunch of apostrophes, race apostrophe and apostrophe chase. After years of struggling to figure out exactly what they wanted to do with the game, they finally put out a massive finished product in 1997 that they were very proud of. Of course, by then, they have decided to drop the apostrophes, and the name had changed from Race and Chase to something called Grand Theft Auto. Eventually, the companies would be purchased by Take-Two Entertainment, and years later, all of this would be known as Rockstar North. You might have heard of them. Following the success of the original GTA, DMA Design and BMG, who own the publishing rights, worked to finish and release Space Station Silicon Valley. Critics raved about this game, actually, calling it clever, witty, comical, innovative, and very, very original. Metacritic put it at an 83 out of 100, a quite positive rating all in all. Everyone as a whole was pleased with the game itself, but it didn't sell very well, and it got very little attention upon its release, which means that the studio scrapped any plans for a sequel and moved on to other things. But why was there no attention for such an innovative game in 1998? Well, Space Station Silicon Valley was released in October of that year, and in '98, Nintendo was putting all of their marketing eggs into a basket known as The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, to be released in November 1998. Now, these days you can find a copy of Space Station Silicon Valley pretty easily on eBay or Amazon or some sort of online retailer, ranging from as low as like $20 for just a cartridge, or up into the $70 range for the box and manuals and everything included, which is a nice piece for collectors, and it's a heck of a fun game to play either way, if you're more of, the emulator sort. As for me, well, my well-worn cartridge is sitting in my bedroom at home, ready to take me back to the game that taught me that accomplishments and unlockables and beating the game was only one thing. The true joy of video games could be found in simply exploring the game as deeply as the developers intended you to. And, also taking control of a hyena and making an enemy laugh itself to death.